Number 8, we will finally complete the biometric entry-exit visa tracking system, which we need desperately. For years, Congress has required biometric entry-exit visa tracking systems, but it has never been completed. The politicians are all talk, no action, never happens, never happens. Hillary Clinton, all talk. Unfortunately, when there is action, it's always the wrong decision. Do you ever notice? In my administration, we will ensure that this system is in place. And I will tell you, it will be on land, it will be on sea, it will be in air. We will have a proper tracking system. Number 9.
Hello everyone, welcome to This Week in Tyranny. Thank you so much for joining me here on this Easter Sunday, April 20th, 2025. We're coming at you for episode 124. Happy Easter to everyone. Thank you for watching this whenever you may watch it. Hope the family's all good, healthy, and most importantly, happy. I remember the good old days. I miss it when I would tell people I'm doing my show on Easter Sunday or Christmas or whenever it was, and it would be a surprise. Like, oh, you're doing that? And now it's so expected. Everybody knows I'm going to do the show anyway, so I don't get the same response anymore. Business as usual, right? But it's, of course, business it is not really what this is. We're doing a lot more than just business. But let's get down to business and introduce the topic. We're going to be talking about the 1-2 punch of deregulation and regulation, and the way that the Trump administration is bringing in the Great Reset. That is my big claim. I'm not the first one to make that claim, but I will really try to support it deeply and with some more primary information, as we like to do. Bringing in the World Economic Forum globalist reset. How could that happen? Well, we're going to dive right into it, and what we will be basing a lot of this on, our reference point, our first one, is this executive order that came out April 9th. It's called Zero-Based Regulatory Budgeting to Unleash American Energy. This is a United States executive order. Zero-based regulatory budgeting. Just to give some background before we even read it and then give more background. Zero-based means by default no regulations. It means starting out with an assumption that anything that's not expressly stated is allowed, right? This is, again, in the Constitution. This is let's get right into it, because it will be better if we just begin. I just want you guys to remember that zero-based regulatory budgeting is what we've been all trying to kind of call for years and years and decades. Let's get rid of all these laws. We have too many laws, too much tyranny, too much oppression. Why don't we just reset it all, start with what makes sense, and eliminate all the things that don't make sense, start with what makes sense, and then build on top of that. It's very foundational. It's very sensible. It's very logical. Okay. And I'm laughing at myself how supportive I am of this. So let's read it and see how sensible it really is. This is how it begins. By the authority vested in me as the President by the Constitution and the laws of the United States of America, it is hereby ordered. Section 1, purpose. That is the name of Section 1, purpose. In our country, laws are supposed to provide the certainty and order necessary to foster liberty and innovation. Instead, our vast regulatory structure often serves to constrict ordered liberty, not promote it. The United States Code itself is more than 60,000 pages, but unelected officials write most of the complex, legally binding rules on top of that, often stretching these statutory provisions beyond what the Congress enacted. I hear this and say, completely right and correct. It begins with purpose, going straight to principles. Now, why? Why, after everything that we've talked about, we're suddenly getting a White House publication that reads like Thomas Paine? I mean, this is the most reasonable thing I've ever heard coming from the White House, you know? It's elegant, it's honest, simple, and logical. You're thinking, has Donald Trump lost his mind completely, that he's starting to talk sense? No. No. Of course, it's very simple. And this is why we started this way, to kind of have fun with that and point out that all that is going on is they're just happening to be arguing the correct point in principle. And that is a luxury that a politician very, very rarely has. But here they have it. So they're taking a position, the government is, where they're actually right about something, at least the principle. They're right about it. Usually the government is wrong about principles, because the whole idea that you can have this authority structure imposing things on people is wrong in principle. So many things that the government does can have decent or acceptable or good effects, but they'll always, once you get back to the principles, they'll be wrong. This is a case where the government is right in principle. When you're not arguing from first principles, then you have to resort to other methods. We talked about all these methods, 123 episodes in the books talking about them. You know, appeals to emotion, polarity, like duality, us versus them, creating anxiety, offering security, offering alleviation of problems. That's usually what they have to do, any authority structure. But sometimes they don't have to. And when you don't have to, you could just tell the truth, because that'll be the most effective, persuasive tactic anyway. And this is the key message. A key message in this episode, and I'm going to drop it early on. Do not fall for it when the government tells the truth. It's not an indication of change course. It doesn't mean they're changing. It's not. It's like your dad drinks every holiday, right? Every holiday he gets drunk, family get together, same old thing happens. And this Easter, it looks like it's going to be different. You think he's going to come home from work. He's been in a good mood all week. You think this week will be different. He said he's going to spend time with you. He said he won't. And that won't happen. He's going to drink like every other time. Okay? The government has not turned over a new leaf. They're just making use of true statements that happen to be beneficial to their goals. It's like playing cards. There's a game called War with playing cards. When you have the higher card, you're going to win against the lower card, okay? Everybody gets all the 52 cards. You get 26 of each, and then boom, you put your card against their card and see if you have the higher one. That's what the political spectrum is, actually. It's just the higher card wins. And they're split into two parties, and neither of them is actually going to win, because it's split. Some of this side has the better cards and some of this side has the better cards. Now, of course, in the game of war, it's a 50-50 shot, but it's never going to even out 50-50 across a small sample size. So we see a leading and a trailing party, and we see changes in the way it shifts and turns over time. But really, these parties, they don't have any distinguishing factor, any factor or quality that is distinguishing one from the other. In other words, there's nothing in principle that makes being a Democrat or being a Republican any better than the other. It's just relative. It's the positions they're taking at the time and the positions that mean something to you. So the higher card wins, and it's the same with ideas. So say we're talking about drug legality, right? Like, example, take one of the issues, okay? We won't take like abortion. We'll talk about drugs and the political stances on them. Well, there are so many different ideas about what drugs should be legal, from being legal for everybody, legal if they're safe, legal if you're above 18, the approval of a doctor, then all the different specific drugs, or banning them altogether. It's all on a spectrum. Now imagine all of those positions on the spectrum as a card. 3 of clubs, 6 of diamonds, king, ace. And what makes the card high, the card that wins, is the one that is closest to moral right, closest to truth, objective truth. And the definition of a moral right is that harm is not being initiated. And on a broader level, it's the net level of violation of rights decreases. That's the position that is the strongest. There's an objective way to analyze this spectrum. So the best card, the political party that's going to have the best claim, it's the one that is the closest to moral right. That's how, of course, people's perception of ideas is manipulated. So that's not, obviously, in practice, it's not the moral position that wins. But in principle, it is. It's just that it's twisted. My point is that the ace in that deck would be to get rid of all the drug laws. So whatever political party is closest to that is going to win the debate. But of course, no political party takes that stance, right? Nobody's going to say legalize everything. But whichever one is most lenient is going to be what people align with. Now, of course, if you have an opioid crisis and you have an epidemic, then the party that's going to say, okay, we want to legalize all the drugs, but this, we have something going on, so this, we need to crack down on it, and then people are going to go for that because they're showing that it's a net level of harm that is decreasing with that position. So it's like one has the 10 of diamonds compared to the 6 of clubs, let's say, and the 10 of diamonds is going to win. A better example would be like gun control. What would be the objective high card? It would be no gun laws. No gun laws is the right answer. But there are reasons for why that wouldn't decrease that wouldn't result in a net decrease of violations of rights, right? Like if everybody gets a gun right now, then you're going to get a whole lot of robberies. You're going to get a whole lot of violations. So there are times in life where you wouldn't play your ace, but that is still the ace. There are times in life where you're right, but you choose a different course of action anyway. And that's the way it would be in that case. When we're making 10 mistakes, which all weigh on each other, and one depends on the other, and it's all intertwined like a bundle of sticks held up by strings. When you're in such a circumstance, if you were to do one right thing, and then all the other 9 wrong things are still happening, it could result in a disaster still, upsetting that balance that was there. So doing the right thing, it's never in a vacuum. So if you do one thing that is right and you say, well, I'm doing the right thing, this is the right thing to do, and then there's all of this stuff going on around it, you'd still do the right thing, but that could cause a disaster, and life shows that to be true, because the effects of long-term actions are not erased whenever you do the right thing once. It's not a magical instant effect. Like if you're eating garbage and eating McDonald's every day, and then you change your diet, you start eating stuff that is healthy. You stop poisoning yourself. You may actually get sick when you do that. You may go into withdrawals when you lay off the alcohol. That's how that works, right? Doesn't mean it's not the right answer, that it's not the right thing to do to get off of that. But that's the way it works. It's not magical. And what happens is these are the 2 political parties, and each of them has some of the answers here and some of the answers there. And therefore, the society as a whole looks at them, our friends, our parents, our children, they look at the issues that are dearest to them, and they're going to align with whatever political party holds the high card on that particular issue. And all that is, the big long explanation is all just to explain why you shouldn't be fooled by a moment of truth-telling. A moment of truth-telling is not enough. And also remember that in this game of war, remember that the dealer is handing out the cards knowingly. So it's not that they just get the cards by chance. The Trump administration was clearly set up for victory throughout what happened in the last few years. And in the COVID era, the COVID era mask rules and all the ridicule, it was an absolute layup for re-election. They handed the conservatives an ace of spades with how they treated people. It was obvious that the people were going to support them after what happened in the last few years. But people do not see it, that they were slipped this card on purpose, right? So we think we're the ones who are playing in this world, that we're sitting at the table and we're playing with the big players, you know? No, the people are the cards. You're being played and shuffled and passed around. And further down in this executive order, which I want to go back to and keep reading, where there are no more truth cards to play, we can read on and actually get a sense of the true colors and true intentions of this executive order. Because obviously I didn't mean what I said in the beginning, that they're talking about principles and they're going back to reason and foundational principles. Let's going back to the reading. Let's read. In particular, the previous administration added more pages to the Federal Register than any other in history, with the result that the Code of Federal Regulations now approaches a staggering 200,000 pages. These regulations linger in such volumes that serious re-examination seldom occurs. This regime of governance by regulator has imposed particularly severe cost on energy production, where innovation is critical. The net result is an energy landscape perpetually trapped in the 1970s. By rescinding outdated regulations that serve as a drag on progress, we can stimulate innovation and deliver prosperity to everyday Americans. This order directs certain agencies to incorporate a sunset provision into their regulations governing energy production to the extent permitted by law, thus compelling those agencies to re-examine their regulations periodically to ensure that those rules serve the public good. I wanted to include it because it starts out sensible. But when they start talking about re-examination, now they're actually contradicting themselves. Because if a law is correct, then it should be correct, and it's going to stay that way. When you're putting reviews, when you're doing periodic reviews of regulations, and outdated regulations are getting washed away, and you're getting re-examinations, and ensuring that those rules serve the public good. Anytime you hear public good, that should be red alert, right? Alarm bells, right? Because we're not talking about what's right, we're talking about what helps the majority. And tyrants ensure that the public good will always be their good, right? So it's not really the public good. Now, you may be surprised because it is an interesting thing to think about. I've heard Elon Musk talking about this a while ago, saying that these regulations, it's like a rule that was made for a completely different purpose, and it's still in effect, and it's not even serving the purpose anymore, and it is an injustice to have this. It should be taken away, this rule, but that never ever happens. And that was a solid point when I first heard it. But really what this is they're putting a statute of limitations on regulations. Like you have statutes of limitations with crimes. So if it's a robbery or something like that, if you can get away with it for a few years, then you can't be tried for it again. Now some crimes, they don't have a statute of limitations, like murder, it doesn't, right? If you take someone's life, you can be tried for it 50 years later. Interesting thing I think about Adam Paul Steed and the whole thing. I did the episodes about the abuse in the Mormon Church. He actually got the statute of limitations removed in, I don't remember if it was Utah or Idaho, for child abuse, because they used to have this for pedophiles, that if they abuse a child and a number of years go by, the children of course kept it silent, then when they figure out what happened to them and they they try to they try to get justice for what happened to them, if like 5 or 10 years passed, then they couldn't do it anymore. So this is why statute of limitations are totally bogus. Because why should this be the case, that you just let a few years go by and now you're not responsible anymore? The temporary nature of anything, laws, regulations, restrictions, that is what tyrants want. Scammers hate when something is set in stone, because then there is no gray area for them to work within. when it's black and white, then you can't rob from anybody, you can't steal from anybody, you can't take their rights away, because it's obvious. It's obvious what happens. But wait a few years and then we'll try it again. This, like, say they pass a regulation about the level of aluminum in the water supply or whatever that is, right? Obviously that's a blow to the corporations that now they don't get to put this toxic chemical in the water. But they wait a couple of years, they'll lobby, they'll work on it, and maybe in 5 years that will get removed. That restriction will get removed, and then a new law would have to pass. So it's like the burden is constantly going to be on the people, and you would have to constantly stay on these criminals to make sure they don't do their crimes, as opposed to that being a eternal, unchangeable statement. Don't put the damn aluminum in the water supply, and that's it. And then the burden would be on them. The burden would be on the corporation to prove that this isn't actually harmful, it doesn't cause all this harm, and then they actually should be allowed to do it. That's the way it should be. But tyrants cannot stand an unchangeable statement. Big government loves malleability and change and interpretation. That's why we have the Supreme Court. But yeah, people are so they love this idea of a review, like a peer trial, a judicial review, and yes, this part of this is, I don't want to address the common law guys too directly, because I really need to study. I need to get familiar with what exactly they're saying. But I see that there's some affinity to this idea that we can get together and these people can review the law, and everybody, and we can make this judgment, and even Supreme Court rulings, like even the libertarian types, the libertarian leanings will hold on to Supreme Court rulings and say, look at this legal precedent. This says that, there was this Supreme Court ruling that any law that is repugnant to the Constitution is null and void. And, that's another thing that is good in its application. We can use that Supreme Court ruling to deal with a lot of these tyrannical things. But in principle, what authority did those judges have to make that proclamation? My point, and why I said it in the first place, remember, if you can interpret a statement, if you could change what it means, then you've already created the gray area for injustice to happen. Making laws temporary is not how liberty is enshrined, it's how liberty is taken away. And I heard Elon Musk making this statement. I've heard him talk about regulations before, and his logic is very sensible. To question the purpose of a rule and analyze it. And he said that by default, rules should be not there, as opposed to the way it currently is, that the rules are by default there. Right? You don't have to go from A and go through all the rules and see if they should still apply. Now, it's correct that when you want to question, analyze things and see if they work fine, you would go from step one. You would retrace your steps and scrutinize the axioms and presumptions to make sure that your conclusion is correct, right? So this principle is right when viewed this way. But when you're talking with somebody, you have to assume that everything that happened already in that conversation is agreed on and true. Otherwise, it's just so mechanical. It's like, no, we don't have to retry old criminals and look at all of the laws and then have to fight the government when we've already went through these wars with them to get the DDT out, right? To all of these regulations that were passed to keep food less toxic. Now we're getting the fluoride out of the water supply. This would be an example. Deregulation would make it harder for that, for these limits on air quality, these limits on arsenic, lead, mercury, right? So this principle, what application are they using it for now? They're using it for the Great Reset, and that is the answer of what's going on here. The red wave, MAGA, Make America Great Again, Make America Healthy Again, this whole conservative revival, it's It's the one in the 1-2 punch to achieve the Great Reset. This is the idea of the 1-2 punch that I'm going to save for later. The Great Reset, we used to talk a lot about it, and now it's really here. What is the Great Reset? Let's talk about it. World Economic Forum Chief Executive Officer Klaus Schwab, he described the three components of the Great Reset: creating conditions for a stakeholder economy, building a more resilient, equitable, and sustainable way, utilizing environmental, social, and governance metrics, ESG, and the third, harnessing the innovations of the fourth industrial revolution. The Great Reset, it's a well-known term, came into prominence around 2020. This was the whole, during COVID, like everybody figured out that the World Economic Forum, this guy Klaus Schwab was telling us about what life is going to be like now. And the fact that it is a well-known term, it's all the more reason to go to the primary source and brush up on what the Great Reset is. Yes, it came into prominence as an idea presented by the World Economic Forum in 2020. And this is it. Here it is by Klaus Schwab. He announced this, and there was this article, "Now is the time for a Great Reset," June 3rd, 2020, by the founder and chairman of the Board of Trustees of the World Economic Forum. He writes, "COVID-19 lockdowns may be gradually easing, but anxiety about the world's social and economic prospects is only intensifying. There's good reason to worry. A sharp economic downturn has already begun, and we could be facing the worst depression since the 1930s. But while this outcome is likely, it is not unavoidable. To achieve a better outcome, the world must act jointly and swiftly to revamp all aspects of our societies and economies, from education to social contracts and working conditions. Every country from the United States to China must participate, and every industry from oil and gas to tech must be transformed. In short, we need a great reset of capitalism." That is the opening. A few things, really two things. One is act jointly and swiftly. So they're talking about fast, decisive action in all aspects of society. And that sounds to me like a global blitzkrieg, which is what it is. And that's always how totalitarian regimes get implemented. In the history of the world, it's never actually happened incrementally. When you think about dictatorships, tyrannies, and times of slavery, it's never really happened slowly like the boiling frog. It always happens in chaos and crisis. And this is coming from the guy always saying, I always say, there's not going to be a big crash, there won't be a nuclear war, there won't be World War III, it's just going to be incremental. And it is incremental. But there is still these long time periods of preparation and then short periods of very extreme change. That's one thing I want to point out. Another thing that I want to point out is the way he introduces this. His last sentence is, we need a great reset of capitalism. A part of it is the World Economic Forum, so they're talking about an economic way of looking at things, but the fact that they're talking about capitalism is very, very telling for me. Now, capitalism, we have to talk about it. I know it's a word that elicits many responses. I am really way before economics. I don't get into the financial stuff because I think it's a joke. I think it's a joke to talk about finance and economics because it's so simple, actually. I want to go to where it's really interesting, which is capitalism. And before we even get to talking about money and finances, we're talking about energy and exchanges of resources, exchanges of energy. This is also what the technocrats do. This is like the philosophical principles that precede the money, the wealth, the economies, okay? Because capitalism just means flow. It means exchange of resources. That's what creates wealth, free exchange of resources. It's just flow. And flow is not a thing that humans invented. Flow is a thing that is there, innate, in nature. It creates food, the water cycle, the energy cycle, photosynthesis, cellular respiration. All of these are economies. These are all economies with currencies and money and exchanges. And the more unrestricted and clean that a flow is, the better the result is going to be. So that is like a free market, the water cycle. It rains, and then the rain, it goes through here, and then it flows down the rivers, and there's exchanges, right? The different species that are at every step of that economy. They are all using that currency, and it is a current, it is running, it is a cycle. All of these cycles, those are economies. Now, that's how I view capitalism. But to let you know how Klaus Schwab and the World Economic Forum thinks, we're going to read from an article from projectsyndicate.org by Klaus Schwab. It's called What Kind of Capitalism Do We Want? This is December 2nd, 2019. So a few months before the Great Reset article comes out, the announcement. But this is right around that time. The threat of COVID is kind of there, but it's kind of underground. This is 4 months before the lockdowns. And it starts like this. What kind of capitalism do we want? That may be the defining question of our era. If we want to sustain our economic system for future generations, we must answer it correctly. Generally speaking, we have 3 models to choose from. The first is shareholder capitalism, embraced by most Western corporations, which holds that a corporation's primary goal should be to maximize its profits. The second model is state capitalism, which entrusts the government with setting the direction of its economy and has risen to prominence in many emerging markets, not least China. But compared to these 2 options, the third has the most to recommend it. Stakeholder capitalism, a model I first proposed half a century ago, positions private corporations as trustees of society and is clearly the best response to today's social and environmental challenges. So this is Klaus Schwab telling you that he, a half a century ago, proposed this stakeholder capitalism. Now, what is it? He goes through the 2 that we currently have. Shareholder capitalism is the default. And really, it's free exchange. It's everyone looks out for themselves. Kind of the way these natural cycles are. The planet is looking out for itself. All the species are looking out for themselves. And the cycle works. So self-preservation, that is the default in nature. Then you have the second, which is state capitalism, which is you still have a market, you still have exchange of resources, but it's controlled. You have a control of all of the exchanges by a central authority, the state. But as we know, this is a false duality because we don't have a beautiful, magical, natural world, and we don't have a beautiful, natural, healthy economy in the United States. So we know this is a false duality. The right answer is not contained within these 2 systems. Now, we know that state capitalism is not the right answer because the nature of progress and innovation is that different mindsets, different people, different kinds of people, a variety of people, that is what produces new things. And it enriches the flow of exchanges, okay? And shareholder capitalism would be the correct system if it stated each individual's primary goal should be to maximize their profits. That would be the right system. You may say, hold on. What are you saying? Are you saying that money is what makes the world better and selfishness and that's all there is? No, I didn't actually say anything about money. But profit, the word profit comes from the Latin word proficere, to profit. Proficere means to accomplish, to make progress, be useful, to do good, to have success. We're only talking about the flow of energy here, right? So the correct thing to do in life is to maximize the amount of energy you have and to use it to advance what you value, to make the progress that you want to make. So if I love my wife and kids, and that's the most important thing to me, that's what I value the most, then the right thing to do, I would say even the morally right thing to do, but we're not talking about morality, we're just talking about objectively, physics-wise, logically, what's the right thing to do, what's the correct thing. It's right to make as much profit as you can and put it towards your wife and kids, if that's what makes you happy, right? That's the right thing to do. Economically, objectively, globally, that's the right thing to do. Not donating money to feed starving children in Venezuela. Why? Because if everyone was engaged in that kind of individual capitalism in the first place, there would be no starving children in Venezuela in the first place. Because the things that created the economic situation in Venezuela are all due to state capitalism. State capitalism is what made that happen. Every famine in the history of humanity was created by intervention in the economy, by the state, or by certain factions, which are like the state, like gang rule. So control of resources is what creates famines. Not that nature all of a sudden food stops growing. So, in short, if all we had is each other, then we would treat each other better. Ultimately. But we don't have individual capitalism. We have that shareholder capitalism. Okay? The first one that he says. Don't confuse shareholder and stakeholder. We're talking about classical capitalism. Which he writes exactly, Klaus Schwab, holds that a corporation's primary goal should be to maximize its profits. The corporation is the problem here, because corporations are treated differently than individuals. They have less liability, lesser tax burden, and in essence, you can't even really do business as an individual. You could be a sole proprietorship, but that's like the corporate version of an individual. It's still a corporation. So due to regulations, due to lobbying, under the table deals, and government contracts, we actually have state capitalism. So shareholder capitalism is really an illusion. It's state capitalism with the private sector as a buffer zone. That's where we are right now. Ayn Rand would call it a mixed economy. But that's what we have. It's puppet capitalism. Now, let's take a step back into history, right? And before we talk about the Great Reset and stakeholder capitalism, which he proposes, let's talk about who Klaus Schwab is, putting it into perspective historically, who the World Economic Forum is, not literally, but in essence, who are they, and what they represent historically. Now, the presidents and prime ministers, all the world leaders, prime ministers and presidents and those guys, they're puppet government. As opposed to the World Economic Forum, the United Nations, the think tanks, the bankers, the kings and queens, high-level church officials of all religions, that's the deep state. They don't change out. People get tricked into thinking that the deep state is like these lifetime bureaucrats and leftist corruption. That's not the deep state. All that is well within that puppet government umbrella. Okay? Klaus Schwab, he represents a generational profession. Generational, behind the scenes. Financiers, these people. As the governments change, they stay in power. Because their power is really, it's never in the mainstream. It's in the background. And it's generational. This is a class of people. Sort of like advisors, influencers, market makers, networkers, ideologues. They stay in these professions as the puppet governments change out, like a revolving door. And these people, they work for state capitalism. Of course, it's much bigger than just state capitalism. They want control over all exchange, control over life itself. So imagine somebody who survived a catastrophe and the world ended, and these people survived and they inherited a farm, but they don't know how to farm, right? He knows nothing. So this guy's life depends on whatever is there growing currently, because he's not the farmer. He's not the guy that planted it. But he's got this economic system in front of him that he needs to maintain in order to feed himself. He can't plant corn. And if he can't plant the corn and the corn dies, then his entire livelihood is going to be based on him putting up barriers and controls, boxes, systems of control and protection over the cornfield to make sure nobody touches the cornfield, because that is his only source of nourishment. That's why the control freaks act the way they act. That's why we have a World Economic Forum. That's why we have a generational control structure. Because these people, it's like they're an alien life force feeding on the organic life creating organism body that is the human species. It's an adequate metaphor, but for those who know, it's not just a metaphor. Like, that is almost a literal history of humanity, of how the species came to be. That's outside of the scope of this episode, right? Back to Klaus Schwab and the WEF. They want state control. But state capitalism by itself is not appealing or desirable to anyone. Nobody's going to buy it. So they manage shareholder capitalism to keep things under control. They give you a bit of shareholder capitalism to make things work and kind of grease the wheels, oil it. Now in China, they went more towards state capitalism, and in other places they've done it too, and it's come and gone, But they want state capitalism for the whole world, throughout the world. That is the goal, if possible. Total control. But as I mentioned, they move toward it incrementally by making capitalism more and more controlled by the state, incrementally. But to actually get past that threshold over to state capitalism, there has to be a shock to the system. A sudden, drastic change to get the people over into that undesirable reality. And that is the Great Reset. That's what it is. That's the Great Reset. Reset capitalism and get people to the state capitalism, which is what they want. But remember, they can never call it state capitalism, so they're going to call it something else. Not shareholder capitalism, but stakeholder capitalism. That's the idea. That's why he writes it that way. He shows you the two, and then you've got the problem, reaction, solution, the third. The actual synthesis of the thesis and antithesis, right? They call it stakeholder capitalism, which is kind of stupid because linguistically, a stake and a share should mean the same thing. So it's confusing that the classic capitalism is shareholder capitalism, and this is now stakeholder capitalism, which to us, to non-economists, it sounds like the same thing, but it's not. Shares are parts of, they indicate ownership, like individuals, but people who own shares of the company, who actually own parts of it, right? Now, a stake is anybody who it affects, anybody who has a stake in the company, in the sense that it's really everybody. So it's really everybody. But we'll let him explain it. So from the worldeconomicforum.org, this is What is Stakeholder Capitalism by Klaus Schwab, January 22nd, 2021. Actually, I don't know if this is by Klaus Schwab. It may not be. So either way, it's from the World Economic Forum, right? It's not really about Schwab, the person. It's about what's coming from them, the institution. This is what they say, okay? This is a primary source, right? What was once seen as externalities in national economic policy making the individual corporate decision-making will now need to be incorporated or internalized in the operations of every government, company, community, and individual. The planet is thus the center of the global economic system, and its health should be optimized in the decision made by all other stakeholders. The same interconnectedness can be observed for the people who live on this planet. The well-being of people in one society affects that of those in another, and it is incumbent on all of us as the global citizens to optimize the well-being of all. Failing to do so will inevitably come back to haunt us. So what he's saying is, you are your brother's keeper. We're all in this together. You can't just get rich. You have to think about the person that is not rich. In other words, it's an imposed suicide sentence. How? Because there is no way you could be concerned about everybody at the same time, the whole world. You can only be concerned with your own well-being. That doesn't sound great. Now, how about this? We'll talk about the claim that the planet being the center of the economic system. Well, the planet is the center of the global economic system, but the planet is an individual. It's a being. It's an entity. We are the planet. And each one of us contains the planet within us. And we are contained within it. The planet already has its own global economic system. And it works for its profit, its own profit. When I thought this, when I speak it, it sounds like crazy. But The planet is an individual, and it works for its own profit by producing no net waste, no expenses. The planet has no expenses, and creating life forms and opportunities for these life forms like us to become their own planets and form their own economic systems. That's what it is. The living species and the creations of the living species on the planet, they're nature's investments. They're investments and profits. That's the truth. And so when it comes to the proper economic system for humans, because that's what we're talking about, they say the planet is the center of the global economic system. I say don't worry about the fucking planet. The planet is just fine. We're talking about what is the economic system for us, for me, for you. The individual is the center of the global economic system. In the individual, always on an individual scale. On the global scale, if you want to actually talk about the whole thing, it's the planet is not the center. It's a distributed network with no center. There's no center. It's a distributed network. There's a fractal nature through it. It's like a peer-to-peer network. There's some of the file over here, some of the file over here. Anybody can access it, and anybody is not only a client, but also a host and a server, right? For everybody, that's my computer people, you know? But to simplify it, I'll just say it in no uncertain terms. I'm not responsible for the choices of others. I'm not responsible for their enrichment or their failures or anything. I am the center of my value system. My values are not yours, and it would be immoral for me to push my values on you or for you to push your values on mine. All we can expect from each other is non-aggression, and just let the natural economy flow. And then love will happen, and then people will sacrifice for the ones they love, which is how it should be. Not everybody sacrificing for everybody. No. But the World Economic Forum expects the opposite. They expect each living unit to have the obligation to feed everybody else. And that's made clear by their own graphic. Their own graphic right here. You see businesses in the center. You got your shareholders, your owners. But not only them. These are all the other stakeholders. Lenders, customers. So you as a customer are a stakeholder in that business. Suppliers, employees, the state and society and the economy. So like visually I look at this and it's like, okay, this is the guy producing and everybody is sucking the life out of it, right? Everybody makes a claim. Everybody makes a claim to what that business does. Where it's like there shouldn't be any of these dots around the business. It shouldn't be so. It's like it's even claustrophobic and dystopian in the way this looks for me. And this is the world that from well, actually, this is not specifically from the World Economic Forum, but this is what Klaus Schwab referred to when he says half a century ago I introduced stakeholder capitalism. Because this is an image, and you see the credit by Klaus Schwab, Modern Company Management in Mechanical Engineering in 1971. I don't know if he was a part of the World Economic Forum there, but this is the origin of that ideology, and it says right here, the company at the center point of its stakeholders. Another interesting thing about this is it is a 7-pointed star. Count them. 7. The 7-pointed star is used by many occult and satanic orders, but don't let that define what it means, because the 7-pointed star is a beautiful symbol, because the octave is the 7-pointed star. If you put the 7 notes of the octave and then the 8th note of the octave is double the frequency of the first, and this is where the Fibonacci ratio and the that 2-to-1 ratio, this is where it comes from. Not directly, so let me not make mathematically inaccurate statements, is not the point, but they're related. And the 7-pointed star, there's a reason why we have 7 days in a week. The world was created in 7 days. And also the 7 hermetic principles, and the 8th in the middle being the principle of care. Now, the crazy thing is, it's not that there's a lot of occult symbolism with the seven-pointed star. It's that the original Great Reset graphic, there's another graphic now, not from 1971, but from 2020 that we talked about, where they introduced the Great Reset officially, that term. Remember that article? Has the exact seven-pointed star. It's funny that, I don't know if you heard that sound, but I have a scroll, like a roll of architectural plans from some job, and I just moved it today. And right when I was saying that, it just fell. It's interesting because we're talking about architectural plans, right? The Great Reset, you're talking about like flattening something and building it over again. And we're talking about symbolism, so that's very interesting. They have the exact seven-pointed star as you see here. Maybe you don't see it at first because they have all of this stuff: forests, circular economy, 3D printing, COVID-19, 5G, the ocean. These are like all the things that are part of these 7 principles which they have on the inner circle, which are part of the Great Reset according to the World Economic Forum: shaping the economic recovery, harnessing the 4th Industrial Revolution, revitalizing global cooperation. That's what they want to do. And count those, you got 7 of them. Again, same 7-pointed star. The 7-pointed star has been, it's like the inverted pentagram. You just add another 2. You could see kind of the Baphomet, the goat's head there, but not to make it all spooky. But the 7-pointed star is there. The crazy thing symbolically about this is, though, this blue thing in the middle where you see Great Reset, I zoomed in, you zoom in on it, and it's actually very interesting imagery they give you here. The it's like a diamond, right? So you see a 90-degree angle of this blue rounded square, and to me, I see that as a graph. I see that y-axis and I see the x-axis, right? This way. So then the top of the blue, you see it going flat like this. So to me, I'm looking at a line, like a plateauing line, and as it goes through time, it drops like this, and then you see in the middle Great Reset. Okay. To me, it's a plateauing line going to 0, and that's a reset. That's what a Great Reset is to me, and it's like the reset of the human population. To me, extinction. It sounds crazy, but this is what it is. Or at least it's the reset of capitalism. At least it's the ending of individuality. It's the end of that experiment in freedom. It's the end of the Renaissance, the Romanticism, the Enlightenment, the Industrial Revolution. They want the 4th Industrial Revolution to be the last. And then the craziest thing is when you zoom in on this, you have a train in the background, and you see those ominous headlights of that train approaching. Now, why did they show a train approaching out of all the things they could use? Right? The Great Reset. And it is like that train approaching. That is what it is. Slowly, incrementally. But once it gets there, it's going to be a crash. And we see the tracks laid down. And in the background, you see the sun setting. It's very yellow, very red, orange. And it doesn't look like a beautiful sunset. It looks like the yellow-orange sky of a bomb being detonated. I see it really, really interesting. I don't think it's an accident, the way they did that. And hey guys, now zooming back out, this whole graph, remember I talked about the occult web of control? Remember I talked about the world not being like a pyramid, but it's like a web, like a circular web, and you've got the different points on the web, and they all intertwine, and one affects the other, and they pull on each other. They seem to see it the same way. This isn't exactly how I would do the occult web of control, but you see the circular model. This is how they do things. So there's some symbolism for you there. And remember, this is 2020 that we're looking at with the same 7-pointed star. Same thing as 49 years ago, 1971, right? From 1971 to 2020. 49 years apart. And that's 7 times 7, baby. The 2 7s. I guess I make these little connections, and then the architectural plans fall over. Hey, the planet is within us, and us within it. So these coincidences, these crazy magical things that happen, like, there's nothing supernatural about it. It's obvious that we would have these stories, these amazing stories, and things occurring, and things connecting and repeating. Like, isn't it obvious that we would have the life of Christ and his crucifixion and resurrection, and that we would have later the miracles and the face of Christ on the wall, all of these visions, all of these miracles? Is it really that crazy? Isn't it like obvious that the miracle of life would do things this way? And hey, these aren't like my thoughts that I made up about me being the planet, and the planet is within me, and it's a global economic system. These are like direct scriptural teachings. Jesus said, we're going to the New Testament. Jesus said in the book of John, chapter 14, verse 11, "Believe me, I am in the Father, and the Father in me, or else believe me for the very work's sake." That's the King James Version. Like that what he's saying is, believe that I am in the Father, and the Father in me. And the last part of that sentence is like, or at least believe the effects that you're seeing, is what he's saying to them. So what do you think he's talking about? Like, it's a consequentialist statement. Jesus is making a consequentialist statement. He's saying, look at what I do. Behave the way I behave, in the way. He's not telling them what to do. He's saying, I behave in the way that is in line with life itself, that is in line with God. And John 14 is all about Jesus trying to explain to his students, after he already told them that he's going to be betrayed. He already told them, hey, I'm going to be killed. Like, I'm going back to the Father. Like, I'm going to be killed. Don't worry. He's trying to explain to them to not to fear death, because death is an illusion. And his students are asking him, but how will we know where to go without you? How will we know? You've seen God. You've seen universal truth. So please show us. Show me just once what it's like. Thomas and Philip saying these things. And he's saying to them, you poor idiots. Don't you see that I'm showing you every day? Every day I'm showing you God through the way that I act. I show love to you the way your mother and father showed love to you, to me, to all of us. I'm showing you every day, he's telling them. Then the next verse, the next line, verse 12. Truly, truly, I say to you, whoever believes in me will also do the works that I do, and greater works than these he will do. So he's saying to them, stop looking for the magical man in the sky. Just have the passion to do the right things. Focus on the real work to be done. And if you know how the universe works through doing the right things, you're going to learn, and you're going to create even greater things than me, is what he's saying. Has anyone read this guy's stuff? Has anyone listened to him? I mean, it's Easter Sunday. It's the day that we commemorate the resurrection of Jesus, after his execution by the government. It's also when we commemorate the rebirth of spring. The season of the year and the economic cycle of the planet, right? The renewal of the economic cycle. Sorry if that's too pagan for anybody, right? I don't mean to blasphemize by doing pagan stuff. But hey, if that's pagan, then how come Easter Sunday is celebrated on the first Sunday after the first full moon after the spring equinox? Like, the Catholic Orthodox Easter Sunday is not celebrated on the day that happened, but on the first Sunday after the first full moon after the first day of spring. That doesn't sound like the typical remembrance of an event, right? It sounds metaphorical. It sounds symbolic. Yeah. Imagine if you celebrated your anniversary like that. Not on the day, but like the Saturday after. I'm sure your wife will be real happy about that, right? That's how we celebrate anniversaries and birthdays now. And I don't mean to be disrespectful with my attitude. It's just that I feel like ignorance is such an ugly, disrespectful thing to do. The world is so amazing, so wonderful, and so simple. if we would just actually look at it and learn from it. And then even worse than ignorance is it's a terrible thing to surrender the individual, to be given all these gifts and say, forget thinking, forget forming my own values, creating something different than has been done before. Let me just say no thanks and make the planet the center of my world. So say, you do it, right? They know better than me. They'll do it. That's what people say. And that's the real deep dive on the Great Reset. So we've talked about the Great Reset and the spirit of the goal and the goal of the lineal control system. Now let's go back to MAGA. Okay, let's go back to Donald Trump, to Elon, to Doge, and how they're bringing in the Great Reset, because I still need to prove it. So contained within that executive order we were exploring, right? We started with the zero-based regulatory budgeting, talking about how principled and reasonable that was. In this statement, if you go down, you'll see he talks about the covered regulations, the conditional sunset date, right? So 5 years after these regulations go into effect, they're going to get wiped out by default. But you see down here, it says the OMB director may exempt a new regulation or amendment from the requirements of this paragraph if he determines that the new regulation or amendment has a net deregulatory effect. In other words, he's saying, yeah, all these new regulations that are getting placed, none of them are going to just stick around forever. They're all subject to review. They're all only going to last 5 years, and then they're going to be re-examined if they're right. Except if they're determined by this director that they're exempt, that they don't need to be treated like the other regulations. And who is the OMB director? OMB is the Office of Management and Budget. The OMB director is appointed by the president. So, in fact, 6 administrations within the OMB: the director, the deputy director for management, and the administrators of the Office of Information and Regulatory Affairs, the Office of the Federal Procurement Policy, and the Office of Federal Financial Management. I don't know why I did 7, it's actually 6. Those are all presidentially appointed and Senate confirmed positions. So it's state capitalism. Is it not state capitalism, what they're doing? Tariffs to empower American industry, right? At the same time, removal of immigrants. Immigrants are what? They're just undocumented workers. They're just people in that ecosystem. It's not that so the idea is that they're draining it, right? They're draining the healthcare, they're draining the Social Security. You're already seeing that graphic where it's everybody pulling on the business, and then part of that does exist, right? But what they really are is they're in this decentralized network. They're just sitting there, existing, living their life. That's what immigrants are, okay? But what they really are is undocumented workers, untaxed workers. That's the problem they have, because they want state capitalism. They want to absorb more of the economy. They want more. So the tariffs are there to get more control, to make it harder to be one of these decentralized nodes in the global network. And also you have industrial policy. So they want to strengthen production, steel, energy, all of this. And hey, it doesn't matter if it decreases prices. The idea is it makes the state stronger. And long term, that is always going to lead toward worse outcomes. But at the same time, they're doing that. They're going to erase the legal and regulatory barriers for businesses. That's what they're doing here. And sure, you could say, hey, it's also deregulation for the mom and pop stores and family businesses, right? So it's supposed to be good for business. It's supposed to be good for us to have less regulations. But who really stands to gain from deregulation that you're seeing here? It's big tech, the mega corporations, the Apple, ExxonMobil, Microsoft, Chevron, Ford. That's the Great Reset. These mega corporations taking over more and more of the economic system. How? Because if the economic system is already unjust, there's already an imbalance due to regulations and a corporate government partnership, you're already having that state of injustice. Then if you reduced the regulatory burden on everyone, you haven't actually made it less unfair. You've made it less unfair for everybody, but relative injustice is still the same. It's still unjust. It's like if you have 2/3 of whiskey with a little bit of Coke in a glass, and then you pour the glass out, pour some out of the glass, and you still have a strong ass drink like you have before. So it doesn't really help. But we see deregulation, we see cutting spending. It's all of this motion and activity, and I'm not saying that nothing's happening. There is motion and activity, but the motion and activity tricks people into thinking that things are changing. That's how regulation and deregulation play off of each other. That's how state capitalism and orthodox capitalism play off of each other with that motion. It's like, if you've seen football, especially, they do this a lot in American football, we're talking NFL. They do this a lot these days, more so than before, is that they have all of this crazy stuff going on before they start to play. They call it eye candy. But they have the receiver going there, and then this guy, and then the running back goes up to the line, and he's making big signals with his hands, and then this guy is stepping back, and he's saying something over there, and the quarterback is looking like he doesn't know what's going on. And you're watching this, if you've never seen it before, you're like, oh my God, this is chaos. You're like, how does anybody know what's going on? There's no way to stop that. Well, it's not actually all that crazy. We get all this sense of motion to get us off of our center. But it's actually not. At the point of the snap, no matter who's running around and what they're doing, the snap is going to come, and it's not really all that different. The center is going to snap the ball no matter what. There's going to be someone receiving the snap, quarterback or whoever else it is. You're going to have somebody out there, some kind of receivers. Maybe this guy went to this side, maybe the tight end went out there. It's still 2 guys here, 1 guy there, whatever the alignment is. You're still going to have that. You're still going to have somebody in the backfield, if they're there, ready to receive the ball or block or run a route. And you're going to have, the offensive line is going to tell you the story anyway. They're going to either go back and pass block, or they're going to go forward and run block. So to those who know what we're looking at, it's going to be the same. It's the same every time. And you shouldn't get tricked by the motion and the activity, because it's business as usual. Now, that's the football analogy, but I like the boxing analogy better, the fighting analogy, combat sports. The 1-2 punch of deregulation and regulation, this is what it is. It's this kind of throwing this out there. You're going to start with the jab or even a feint. It looks like an attack. It's received as an attack. So you do this so that your opponent gets that response to that motion, to get them off their center, to get them out of position, right? They start out like this, they have to respond to an attack. So they're either going to put their hands up, or they're going to move their head, or they're going to parry. Either way, they're going to do something that reveals their position. And this is years and years of regulation. It's setting us up. It's setting us up like here, right? We're there, staying disciplined with our guard up and responding to all of these jabs, all of these attacks. And they're setting us up. And when you do this, when you move in, you're getting pushed toward the position to get really devastated with that knockout punch, with the big shot. That's the 1-2 punch. That's what it's all about. So don't be fooled by deregulation, because it's just a setup. It's a setup punch. Now, it's not just deregulation, it's also regulation. So I'm going to throw in some regulation, because this story came out, I thought it was significant, because I've seen things heading this direction for a long time. Of course, this is part of the Great Reset. Facial recognition, artificial intelligence, and controls, registration, more efficient working databases. This Discord's face scanning age checks are start of a bigger shift. That's a clumsy title. The point is, Discord, the app, is starting to scan the faces of people who are using it as an age check. So these websites, these apps that kids are using, the TikToks, the Instagrams, this is start of a shift where you don't just say, I'm older than 13. You have to scan your face, and they'll have to verify if you're an adult, like if they're selling you alcohol. Now, this is in the UK and Australia. Discord is testing face scanning to verify some users' ages in the UK and Australia. And social media expert Matt Navarro told the BBC, "This isn't a one-off, it's the start of a bigger shift. Regulators want real proof, and facial recognition might be the fastest route there," he said. Now, they're talking about the United Kingdom and Australia, but let's see if there's a trend already in the USA there. Real ID. Real ID was floated for so long, and it looks like it may actually go through under Donald Trump. Isn't that crazy? The Real ID, of course, being it's like the two-step verification, right? They want to connect it with your phone, connect it with your address, more and more until they connect all that with your face. It's crucial to get an entire file on you. Real ID being pushed. Voter registration, that's a big thing. I saw that thing being set up. All the thing with the 2,000 mules and the voting machines, and they're controlled by China. They're controlled by Russians. The voter registration, all this stuff. Oh my God, they're going across the border, and the first thing they do, they vote blue. Oh, I can't believe it. We hear a lot of that, and that one I clocked from early on. I knew that they were going to do that. And then biosecurity, even on the medical side. mRNA vaccines, biosecurity for these chickens, right? And I will probably play this because I think it's just a real powerful thing to have, and maybe I'll make it my outro. The biometric visa. They're promoting this now. The pro-freedom conservative guys now, they somehow are having their president, pushing for a biometric border, right? It's only for citizens, right? Making sure that nobody's taking your stuff. I don't know, man. How do you go for this stuff? They're pushing to streamline. They're pushing to reduce. They're pushing to make it an easier database like Doge. Everything is digital. Everything is going to be efficient. Yeah, what's going to be the most convenient and digital and efficient thing? Microchips, Neuralink. I mean, hey, it's so simple, and that is the trend in the USA. So it is there. It's just different. Now, when it comes to internet regulations, USA has always been more free. They've been more laxed. Here, you don't have the internet being so locked down, so restricted. But Europe, UK specifically, has always been close to blatant internet restrictions, like the way things were in London during the pandemic. Like people would actually get arrested for being outside without a mask. Here, no. There were, of course, blatant overreaches, but it's not to that level. But in the UK and the European Union, it is more like that. We talked about the digital services in another episode a while ago, but this isn't even the Digital Services Act, but it's in that same spirit. And this is a whole new law we're talking about, so we're going to read it real quick. The law says all websites on which pornographic material can be found, they're talking about pornography, right? Starting with that. So all websites on which pornographic material can be found, including social media platforms, must introduce robust age-checking techniques such as demanding photo ID or running credit card checks for UK users by July. The long-awaited guidance issued by regulator Ofcom has been made under the Online Safety Act, OSA, and is intended to prevent children from easily accessing pornography online. Firms which do not comply with the Online Safety Act could be fined up to 10% of their global turnover. The social media company requires users to take a selfie video on their phone and uses AI to estimate the person's age. Like Discord, they can alternatively upload a picture of their photo ID. So I wonder if you could see that it's not really about the age verification, because like we're not talking about a birth certificate really. Like it's not about the age. It's that they want to do face scanning, and then the face scanning is real smart, so it's going to estimate how old you are based on your face. Or you could just upload a picture of your ID, which of course has your face and has your registration, so you're tied into that database. It's like integrating the already tyrannical registration, the whole ID system, the database of control, and then just integrate it into facial recognition and all that, and that. But it's only so you don't see pornography, so you don't see porn. Now, who wants kids to see porn? Nobody. So it's obvious. It's a classic textbook example of how they do it, right? The regulations starting out with something that is so clearly a problem and so obviously needs to be dealt with, and you start with that, and it's a Trojan horse, and then before you know it, you got biometric registration. That's the reason they want this so much. It's because there are too many variables in managing human beings if you actually have to be the active party. There are too many people. People are too difficult to manage if you actually have to go out there and surveil them. Yeah, the phones are recording everything, guys, but just because, they can see me through this camera and through this microphone, like that's not really that much of a threat. It's going to be a threat when you have a self-updating database. You need the database to write itself if you're controlling these people. You need the people to register themselves and to report themselves, to self-report. That's how it's done. Again, going back to the ecosystem, to capitalism, you need an economy where it's managing itself. There's no way to be powering this control system. It'll collapse upon itself. You need the people to enslave themselves, and you do that through self-reporting. And that's why the ID verification is such a big deal to me. And I talked about YouTube doing it. And YouTube is trying to encourage that more. It wants you to do that facial recognition video. And I almost did it because I'm a guy who's not very privacy heavy when it comes to electronically. Because I talk about armed rebellion openly. It's kind of like I like to throw up the middle finger and say, my name is Konrad Rogas. I'm from Poland and I'm a proud American. And I'm going to overthrow the government if it does anything to violate the principles of this country and to violate the principles of objective truth and morality. So fuck you, come and get me. So I love to do that. But this thing that was so clearly uploading a video of yourself to verify your identity. See, they don't show, it's not about age verification for YouTube. It's just about to verify your identity because there are so many bots. The whole thing about Twitter Blue, right? And the bots on Twitter. It's not really about that. It's just about they want you in the database. And I didn't do it for YouTube and will not do it. So we're getting towards the end of this episode. We just talked about deregulation in the United States, on big tech and energy producers. But here it is on the UK and the US in individual internet use. It's not deregulation, it's regulation. So again, we talked about the high cards, right? We're talking about the right cards to play. Now, we're not talking about between political parties, but we're talking about parts of the world. This part of the world plays this card, then they play this card here regulation, here deregulation, and they work in its selective application where it relatively applies to its maximum benefit. And again, this is just shuffling cards. It's just like I talked about in the beginning. And we just buy all the motion and all the chaos like an inexperienced, flinching, first-time boxer. That's what we are. And people miss this too. People always think that what's going on right now, this year, this moment, is the big thing. Everyone voted this election because this one's different. If you care about the country, you have to vote. This time it's different. Everybody always says that now is the most important time in history. Even the people protesting now against the Trump administration right now, like people who I agree with in what they're talking about, they do not see that right now, everything they believe, they're just responding to the jab. And it's just a jab and the 1-2 punch combination. So they're like, oh my God, we saw it coming. We dodged the jab. And when they think they've won and succeeded, they're going to walk straight into that vicious big punch, the Joe Frazier left hook, and they're going to support it then. And like the Joe Frazier, most likely it will come from the left wing. Yeah. Long story short, my big prediction is that the conservative experiment will not last long. It may last 4, 8, 12 years, but in the grand scheme of things, it's just going to set up the Great Reset, and there will be probably another 50 years of progressivism and very sustainable United Nations global government Agenda 21 bullshit. And it's the same old story on This Week in Tyranny. No one appreciates the setup punch, the nuance, the technical work being done out there, because it's being done all the time. And it's just like people watching real fights. Get drunk, Trump walks out, they cheer for him. It's all very simple, you know. People aren't appreciating the intricacies and the little things and things that make it all beautiful. Not directing their attention where it really should be, which is on the individual. Maybe I should do a combat sports series, right? Get the MMA community into the fold on this stuff. But that's beside the point. I do want to end it with a story. One time I was in a fight. This is many, many years ago. Okay? I don't know if I was 20 yet, but it was around that time. And I was in a fight. 2 weeks after I was in another fight with the same guy and I broke my hand. This is why, I don't know if you could see this, but I'm missing this knuckle. And so my hand is still wrapped up, right? A while after I broke this bone in the middle of my hand. And then the guys catch me and he wants a rematch. He wants revenge because really I was in the wrong, and it's not the point. The point is, this fight happens and it's 1-on-1, and this is a guy that's shorter and smaller than me, but he's winning the fight because I got a broken hand and I'm dominant with my left. So the right wasn't very strong, and I was a little drunk. I was a lot drunk, and the left I wasn't able to hit fully because it was broken. And in that moment, I'm realizing that I'm very incapable of damaging this guy, and he's feeling pretty good about it. You know, I'm not really being hurt because, you know, I'm kind of it's tough to hurt me as far as head trauma. But so what I do is I just raise my foot, everything that is going on with the hands and all this stuff with the hands, and all of a sudden just my foot, it's like a straight kick, and just hit him right in the face and knock the guy down, and that was the end of the fight. That's how the great reset's gonna happen. It's not even just the 1-2. Think about, they've announced it openly. These guys, these globalists, they openly write books about how they're gonna enslave humanity, they're gonna manage all the resources, and they're gonna change the species. So they tell you that right away, and you think that it's going to be something you're expecting. It's not. So always stay a step ahead. Always look at the nuance, and don't let yourself get pushed into the setup knockout blow, because it's not a punch at all that's going to make this happen. It's one of those kicks. It's a kick that you're totally not expecting. So it's not that we're even against this incredible enemy. It's just that we are so absent to our own identity, to our own life. None of us are really living in a way that is the center of the universe. You're supposed to live at the center of the universe. You're supposed to show people, hey, I get the universe because I'm living its principles. So the planet is within me, and I am within the planet. That kind of understanding and knowledge of the principles, and putting them into action, not just looking at something, but using that same observation to look back at yourself, admiring the beauty in the world, but also through all that, admiring yourself, valuing yourself, loving the things you love, the people you love, but also wanting to be loved. Jesus Christ came to the earth and brought that knowledge, right? Today we celebrate his resurrection. I see every day as a day to celebrate that resurrection of that spirit. And thank you very much, and I'll see you next week on This Week in Tyranny.
God, I mean, that is a dejected...
This is how Leon Edwards knocked out Kamaru Usman. Throughout the fight, Leon observed Usman's defensive habit of leaning his head to the right outside his guard. To set up Usman, Leon threw body and leg kicks, conditioning Usman to expect kicks landing low. In the final sequence, Leon feinted a jab and stepped forward into range. He then threw a left cross and kept his hand extended, obstructing Usman's view, and landed a perfect head kick.